Hi guys and welcome to another Fool of the Week. This week's Fool is Laila Cunningham from Reform UK. Now she appeared on GB News alongside Barry Gardiner from Labour, where Barry raised the point, a valid point, that if the UK left the European Convention on Human Rights, it could jeopardise security agreements that the UK has with the EU. And have a listen to the response.
But I just want to check with Laila whether she agrees with Lord Wolfson's assessment that it could disrupt intelligence sharing and what we would need to do to put in place, if one withdrew from the ECHR, what one would need to do to put in place that basis for good cooperation if the EU were saying, no, we no longer trust that the UK can do this.
You think that the EU would risk all their security because we leave the ECHR?
This reminds me of the arguments from Brexiteers. If we leave the European Union, they're going to treat us like an equal, even though we're outside the club, because they need us. They need us more than we need them. And we're hearing exactly the same arguments again. Well, if we leave the European Convention on Human Rights, of course the EU is going to maintain security agreements or whatever with us, data sharing, because it would be in their interest.
You think that the EU would view Britain, someone that we fought for freedom. We, as I said, we created the Magna Carta, the trial by jury. We are known for our human rights.
It's not about the human rights. This is a point that I have to keep reinforcing, because people don't seem to understand. Leaving the European Convention on Human Rights is not about the human rights themselves. It's about protections for those rights. So when Robert Jenrick or Nigel Farage talk about, don't worry, we'll have a British Bill of Rights. Yes, but the problem is, if the government doesn't respect your rights, where do you go? At least when you have an international court that upholds the rights that the UK signed up to, people have another step they can go. So if they don't feel that the British government or the Supreme Court in Britain is respecting their rights, they can go somewhere else. This is what Reform UK and the Conservatives want to remove.
Hang on.
This is what they've said.
No, they haven't said it. What Lord Wolfson says that could be, but we have intelligence sharing with Australia, with Canada,
disagree with Lord
America.
Wolfson? You just think he's completely wrong. But there's no risk of this at all.
I don't think there's any. I think the bigger risk that faces the country now is illegal migrants coming.
What risk do so-called illegal migrants pose? From a security point of view, if people commit crimes, they get arrested and they get put in jail. But what security risk do so-called illegal migrants represent? Remember, when they come into the country, if they want to claim asylum, they have to be registered and they have to go into a system. She's talking about asylum seekers here, posing some sort of security risk, but there is no security risk that I can see because they're in the system. Now, there could be a security risk to people who are not in the system, but that's a different argument. That's where you want to work with your neighbours, with the European Union. Look, there are people coming into the country. We need to know more about them. That's where you have to cooperate. But Reform UK represent the opposite of cooperation. They want to cut Britain off from Europe. They want to turn Britain into the North Korea of Europe. So now they're saying, well, of course we're going to cooperate with the EU because it's in their interest. Yes, but you are of the mindset that you don't cooperate with Europe because Europe is the enemy.
Coming into our country, being housed in towns and centres, sexually assaulting girls, some of them are terrorists. That for me is
the point that was raised by Barry is, what security agreements are you going to have with the European Union if the UK leaves the European Convention on Human Rights? And now she's talking about something completely different, because Reform UK don't have a plan.
Most pertinent risk that needs to be dealt with, and I don't think either party, apart from Reform, it has the guts to deal with it. It's as simple as that.
Interestingly, the thing is, before Brexit, what happened was people from the Independence Party and the Brexiteers said the EU would never do these things to damage trade because it would damage their trade as well. But then when we actually left, they did. So the idea that we should just ignore these threats and not actually have a strategy to cope with them, and that's all I'm asking you for. I'm asking you what the strategy is to cope with the threat, and it doesn't seem that you've got one.
So you're saying that the the EU should dictate what we do still?
No.
What What is wrong with these people? Is she not actually able to understand the question? Does she not listen to the question? What is your strategy to deal with security agreements if the UK leaves the European Convention on Human Rights? If the EU says, hey, look, you're not following these conventions, so we're not going to respect any sort of agreements, or we can't believe that you will respect an agreement because you are tearing up international conventions. You're abandoning the rule of law. You're abandoning international conventions. So how can we trust you? And your response is, ridiculous. This is a joke party. I keep saying they're a joke party. Nigel Farage, if he becomes Prime Minister, is going to have people like this in his cabinet. People who wouldn't know their backside from their elbow. And they will be running government departments into the ground. She can't even understand the question. She can't even respond to the question. And this is why she's our Fool of the Week. I'll see you next time for our next Fool of the Week.